Welcome back. In this video, we are going to talk about the following topics. We are going to talk about the idea of DAX expressions, what are they and why are they needed. We are going to learn about what are static versus dynamic aggregations and how DAX basically helps implement static versus dynamic aggregations. We are going to look at how do you create a new column in DAX. We are going to look at how do you create a new measure in DAX. Under measures, we are going to look at what is the difference between row versus a filter context. What are implicit versus explicit measures in DAX. We are going to look at how to create quick measures in DAX. And we are also going to look at how do you create new tables in DAX. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the basic idea behind DAX is the need for calculations after load from Power Query. We know that in Power BI, Power Query acts as the engine for data extraction, which is E, transformation, which is the T, and then load. And this load is what happens into Power BI. So the transformations are happening in Power Query, which is a great product for performing date calculations, text calculations, new columns, group by aggregation, pivot, unpivot, merging. So it is great at all these new data transformations as well as creation of new queries. And once that data is loaded in Power BI, the expectation is that we have done all the transformations and we may not need any further transformations or changes in data or new calculation. But it so happens that there are scenarios where you cannot always have your calculations done beforehand itself. There are scenarios where you may need to do the calculation even after the loading part, which means you can have some T part or the transformation part even after loading the data in Power BI. The expectation that once we load the data in Power BI, all I need to do is visualization, not the correct one. So we are going to look at how DAX expressions fit in this scenario where you may have to do additional transformations after the data is loaded in Power BI. The second scenario is that you are doing the extraction of the data and straight away loading in Power BI, and after loading in Power BI you are doing all the transformations needed. This is the second paradigm of data extraction, transformation and load. This is the traditional one and this is the modern one. In this, you straight away load the data in your destination, which means in this case it would be Power BI. So you extract and then load the data straight away into Power BI and then you perform the transformations. So here in this case you anyways need to depend upon DAX expressions for new column calculations or new metrics creation and all. So let's look at how in these two scenarios DAX expression really fits in well and gives you the power of creating new measures, new calculations, and also to see what are those situations where you have to depend on DAX, where you cannot pre-calculate some of these measures or metrics and which you have to do in real time on the fly. So let's go ahead and have a look at the same. Alright, first let's look at the scenario where I have straight away loaded the data in Power BI. I'm not doing any data transformation using Power Query and want Power BI itself to be used for any new calculations or creating of new metrics. So let's look at this example. We have the employee details loaded in Power BI, and suppose we want to calculate that if the employee's gender is female, your tax slab is more relaxed compared to male. So I would like to make a rule that if the gender is female, the tax deducted is 20%, but if the gender is male, the tax deducted is 30%. If I have to create this sounds like conditional column in Power Query, which means there will be an if else. What else you can think of when you think about if else? We can think about Excel. We know that in Excel we have a very simple if else logic, and we can write that as a function and implement it very easily. That calculation depends upon a single value. So in Excel, all I can do is I can create a new column and I can put a rule, and row by row it is going to check what is the gender, and based on that it is going to assign a value. We know how that can be done in Excel. Can we do that in Power BI? Yes, we can do that using DAX expressions. Let's see a starter example, our first example of DAX expressions here. What I want to do is, let's visualize. Let me actually show you the Excel counterpart of this data. And we are here, and we have this employee gender, and based on that I want to create logic, which is, let me take as that tax slab. And here I'm going to put a simple rule: if and this value is equal to female, right, then I'm going to have 0.2 which is 20%, and if it is a male it's going to be 0.3 which is 30%. So here I'm saying that if the value of gender is female, then 0.2, else 0.3, which means if it is male it is 0.3. So let's close this, and if I just double click on this one, this gets auto generated, right? So what we did was I created this formula, and this formula is basically dependent upon the gender, and it is creating that. What I created is a new column. Similarly, I can go ahead and do that in Power BI itself. And when we go to the Power BI in the table section, in the table tools, you can look at this section where you have these different options of new measure, quick measure, new column, and new table. And the question is, which one of them should I choose? You can get some hint from the icon itself. As you see this one, it looks like a grid, and you have a blue kind of a column. So whenever your requirement is to create a new column, just like in Excel what we saw, you use this option. The point is, here you have a row by row dependency on a separate column, right? You are either adding two columns or dividing two columns, or using a column and putting some if condition and creating a new column. So the flavor is that you want to create a new column which has a row by row dependency. So let's see how do we do that. Let me click on new column, and as soon as I do that, there are a few things you can see. Can you see that here we have a new icon coming in, and its name is column, and you have, just like Excel, looks like a formula bar which where I can write something. I want to name this column. Let me name this column as tax slab. And here, just like Excel, I can write an if logic. I just type if, and we get this function, and it gives me the signature also. So I'm checking what is my condition. My condition is that gender. So if I just type gender, I can refer gender along with the table. So I can click on it, and I'll say equals to, I'll say female, then I'll say the same logic, 0.2, 0.3, close this, and this one is the one which will say commit, and it will check whether the formula is correct or not. If I click on it, there's no error I'm getting, and what do I see is I got a new column created which is called as tax slab. What we did was we wrote our first DAX expression, and it appears like it just like Excel functions. What we have done in Excel is what I'm doing here. So what's the big deal? It's true that as of now we feel that whatever we have done in Excel as functions is what I'm writing here, and DAX expression seems easy, and that's something we can easily implement in our scenarios. But the real value of DAX expressions is when we start looking at some of the complex scenarios where you cannot pre-calculate some of these measures or new columns. What does it mean, and how does DAX help in those scenarios is what we are going to look next.